afternoon and welcome to this session on post-COVID architecture. Home has always been our habitat. There's nothing new about that. But now we have spent over 40 days under this lockdown. We have been at home, we've been working from home. It has been our recreation space, our working space, our eating, thinking. We are doing everything at home. It has virtually become our entire existence. So how does an architect think about homes? How do we recalibrate spaces within our home? This connection between inside spaces, outside spaces. How do we, as architects and even students of architecture, how is everybody thinking about it? I think it is. We've all reached a point where we kind of need to rethink architecture because homes are at this moment everything. So, what we've been doing at our university, our students of architecture in third year, they have been working on their housing project in the design studio. And this entire experience of lockdown and COVID and this pandemic has changed the way they have been thinking. It has changed the way they have been approaching their design, approaching the individual apartment design, the community design, the tower design, how they place everything together. All those things need a fresh approach. So these students have been redeveloping concepts, they have been rethinking, they have been trying to apply the experience and knowledge of COVID-19 into their housing schemes. And I want to now introduce some of them here, and I think they will start talking about it. I think I will start with, okay, I think while most of us live, in this very safe, very nice environment, there are some people around us living in, slums, living in highly populated areas, very dense, and they don't have the exposure or the ability to make the most of their spaces. So one of our students, Kristen Matthew, he's been working on this slum in Dharavi, and it is a highly densely populated area. And he's been trying to think about creating isolation spaces, quarantine spaces, and at the same time trying to give them an outdoor exposure to to gardens, to some outdoor space. So I think I'll call upon Kristen first, and we can take a look at what he's come up with in Dharavi. Yeah, Kristen, are you ready? Yeah, you need to unmute. You need to unmute yourself.
Hello, ma'am. Thank you for giving this opportunity for me. And I'd like to say by this, like, COVID-19 has changed the life of many people, including rich, poor, everyone. But the people who have changed the most is the wage workers. They have been migrating from bigger cities to their rural areas, their homes. So what my design idea was residential, but I could not create a luxury apartment for them because that's not economically possible. So I had to create spaces like isolation chambers, their testing areas, their storage spaces for medical kits and all that stuff. So these inflatable structure is just for that. These are spaces for storage spaces, their testing spaces, their isolation chambers. This particular structure, the structure B, what I'm talking about, was created in places like Air Force areas. It is a structure for hangars where planes come from, where planes are kept and used, and engineers work on it. And I transferred them to isolation chambers for people who are infected or the people who are tested and waiting for their results so that they can get into the building. I didn't have the opportunity to work inside such buildings, but I have worked on another project, my residential areas. I have to say that these people don't have breathing spaces in between the buildings. So what I have done is uh, create a courtyard and breathing and places so that air can come through the buildings and between the buildings and go through the courtyard so that there can be ventilation in between. So I have made a crisscross of a tower in which there can be gaps in between the towers so that air can come through, and placing it horizontally is because to create interactive spaces so that they can interact with each other within their homes as well.
Yeah, that's very good. And do you want to go on
So
to explain the containers that have been put to
yeah,
use?
the main problem is I should create a structure that is readily available, faster to create, and the least amount of effort in that. So Dharavi is already near to a lot of shipping containers. So I have tried to construct myself to create a building with shipping containers because of that. I've I've stopped myself from doing anything other than shipping containers. I've created this common spaces by pairing up shipping containers in between so that they can be shaft in the core. I've given green walls in the outside so there can be insulation inside. And shipping containers, I can tell you that we have to work a lot on insulation in the building so that shipping containers inside can be cool enough for the people to survive. So I've given green walls. I've given mirror finishes in inside so that light can pass through and illuminate the inside with least amount of economical effort. As you can see in the sections, I have given a bed. It's a studio apartment with a washroom, kitchen, and bed. You can see the 3D. The foundation is important because I've given insulation on the roof. I have given a bit of insulation in the roof. As you can see in this area, there's a little cavity in between. There are natural insulation materials in there.
Yeah.
And then we have to think about the foundation as well, because I'm creating a structure in a muddy area and near to a water body. We have to readily think about foundation technique as well. So I've created this foundation technique. I've chosen this foundation technique so that it can be insulated in summer and hot times as well.
Right. So do you want to zoom in on the plans and just show us how this 40 feet container is operating?
Yeah. Because of the prediction that this pandemic is gonna extend for a long time, I have decided this style of building would be more applicable for a person or a people of economically weaker section can live in a comfortable situation and can isolate themselves safely. The windows of the buildings are facing towards the courtyards so that they can have interactive spaces between them. Any one of them can interact and play or do anything in between them or sing a song, do anything. And they can look at them with the facility of being in their own room and safety. Right. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, right. Looks very good. Christian, I can see the green walls. I can see the effort you've made in, insulation of these containers, and how I think you've tried to economize space for them, and at the same time give them, as much open space and as much, again, privacy within that space, right? So
yes,
it does look, it does look like a great.
In traditionally we use columns and beam for courtyard. I created a truss for the supporting of the courtyard and stuff, so that it can look like a hanging courtyard. It can look like a hanging corridor. I've given a truss kind of situation there. So this was a small building and a 4 weaker section. So that's why I could not do a big kind of effect in there.
Yeah.
But what I did, I think it would affect the people in there. And thank you for that.
Okay. Yeah, very good. So, yeah, I think you can remove the, yeah, okay, great. So, I can see a lot more students have joined in now. Okay, so, yeah, now coming to the housing societies that we are used to, you know, the kind of residential complexes that we are used to. Now, how do they deal with all this infection control protocol? Do we really need to have that infection control protocol? Can we just build something that adapts to to a pandemic and also function under normal circumstances as a normal luxury apartment with spaces? So I think I want to call the next student, Priyom, now. Okay, so Priyom has again designed some very interesting spaces within an apartment and outside the apartment as a community, and he's designed spaces that are flexible, you know, that can adapt to the pandemic and yeah, in case of under normal circumstances, they can also work very well as a regular apartment. So, Priyom, please start explaining.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Thanks a lot, ma'am. So when we talk about a pandemic situation, we actually when we talk about architecture after this pandemic, so
Yeah.
it's not a much of a difference that we want to make. We cannot change the whole unit of the house. So what we can do is we can make the house flexible, like flexible to handle a pandemic situation. So we can do that while by segregating the flow of people and providing reorienting some spaces inside within the uh, apartment, and like creating buffer zones before entering, so that we can use them as a sanitization space. So as you can see in my plan, you you can see a lot of buffer zones and the segregation of the staff area and all. So these buffer zones are actually a normal entrance foyer of a house that is been that can be used as a very normal for a very normal purpose. So during a pandemic situation, these areas can be used as a sanitization point. We can create temporary barricades and these things, and then we can
Yeah.
actually
Understood.
sanitize people and from there. The main concept is to create buffer zones. So as you can see, we can also provide quarantine spaces within the apartment by reorienting some spaces. Like you can see in my library area, like this house, the the bedroom space. So this is a normal case scenario when there is no pandemic. This room can be used for a multi-purpose area. But what if we need to quarantine someone? As my third main concept is designed for people, not just pathogens. So we need to make it people friendly. We cannot treat the person like a virus. So that buffer area can be used for the person who is being quarantined to have a visual contact with the family. So the main concept is to create a visual contact with a with a physical barrier. So when we are within the apartments, as you can see in the plan which I've blown up, so you can see the dotted line shows the temporary barricade, and the yellow line shows the visual contact with the families. So he can have a dining the time with the family with a physical barrier, but with a visual contact. So now, when we are living as a family inside a house, we should have a visual contact with the neighbors as well. We should know that what they are doing. So so we can do that while staying in the balcony. So in a balcony, we can either stagger them or do anything. But staggering them will create a lot of privacy issues in the balcony. In a
Can you
apartment,
zoom
we
into
need a very
Priyam? Can you zoom
uh,
into that that area, the
Yes,
balcony,
yes,
yeah, the 3D, yeah.
yes. So this is actually the concept which I have used. So in the balcony, I've created a private, okay, private space so that
Yeah.
people, in a pandemic situation, people would love to use the socializing deck. But in a normal case scenario, we have a lot of socializing areas where we can go physically. We can go and socialize. But in a pandemic situation, we can't do those things. So while staying within the housing facility, I have created a balcony that's flexible, that it will have a socializing deck from which you can go and from where you can socialize with the other neighbors. So
Yeah.
in when you're in the private space, nobody is able to see you. But when you're in the socializing area, you will have a visual contact with your neighbors. So these kind of flexible plans we can create, and uh, just the main concept is to create flexible plans so
Yeah.
that it can be pandemic friendly, not a design which is like designed particularly for the pandemic. So following that concept, I have made a conceptual sheet
Yeah,
like that.
no, looks very good. I think, yeah, and I think what's very important here is when you say this design is for people and not just pathogens, right?
Yes,
So,
yes,
so
yes,
we are giving, I think, by creating these right spaces, you're giving people who are in quarantine or who are in isolation, you are giving them enough visual connection and social connection with their families, with their neighbors, without actual physical contact or without, actually transferring, the virus. So,
yes, yes,
yeah, so I think it's very interesting, and especially the balcony and the deck area. I hope everybody can see how the the how a part of the balcony is comes out like a deck, and it's staggered on every floor, so every floor people can have contact with each other. It's
yes,
something I think we've realized in this lockdown period, that for 40 days we are not able to see to see our neighbors. I mean, even though we are in the same tower, some a friend of mine could be just one floor above or one floor below, but I can't see them because our balconies are just stacked on top of each other. There is no visual connection. So by providing
mm,
this deck, suddenly, I mean, I can see who's living above me, below me. I mean, who lives where, and at least from a distance we can see each other, we can talk to each other, and not feel isolated. Yeah, I
yes,
think, and I think architecture can do a lot of these modifications, a lot of these slight tweaking of design, and introduce a number of these things at the space level, and make it easier for people. Yeah, I think that's a
yes,
really good input from you, Priyom. So if you can take this out, so
yeah. Thanks a
uh,
lot.
yeah, okay. And I can see a lot of other students are already there. And I think now I want to call upon Priyanka Dabra, and I think she's going to tell us more about this. Architectural solution to quarantine areas, to isolation areas, and how these can be created within an apartment, without really physically isolating a person, or making it a depressing solution. So yeah, Priyanka, let's see your concept, and you can explain. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. So, as we all know, that during this pandemic, according to the guidelines, we are being asked to maintain physical distance inside our homes as well. So, keeping that in mind, I have created a mezzanine floor inside the apartment, which actually creates physical distance but doesn't isolate the person as such. So the idea was to create a mezzanine floor which is self-sufficient in itself. So the lower floor in the apartment has all the other areas like dining and kitchen and bedrooms and master bedrooms and all of that. But mezzanine floor in itself is self-sufficient because it has a bedroom, it has a little living space, it has a pantry, and there's a balcony as well. Uh, So the mezzanine can be used as to create to have social distancing, as well as in case, just in case if the person is infected, that infected person can live on the mezzanine floor and not feel isolated. They can still feel connected through visual connection, like you can see here. So this is the railing basically of the mezzanine floor, where the person is standing and they can actually talk to the person on the lower floor who's sitting in the dining area. So that's how they can still feel connected while maintaining physical distancing. And when we talk about uh, isolating the person who's infected, it doesn't mean that we have to make them feel alone. So I have tried to make them connect with the family as well as nature. So for that, I have given a balcony on the mezzanine floor as well. So this is the balcony on the lower floor, and this is the balcony on the mezzanine floor, which helps them connect with the neighbors, with their own family, and to the nature as well, so that they can still breathe and they can still have fresh air, and they can feel good about themselves even while they are isolated. So that's the idea, but it doesn't disturb the privacy of any other apartment, because the cantilevered balconies are one above the other. So that's also the issue of privacy. And just in case if they have to function regularly in normal life, the mezzanine floor can be used for children's play area, or just in case if nobody is infected at their home and they are just normally living, so they can use mezzanine floor for working from home, because it can actually be a quiet place from where they will not be disturbed, or there won't be any noises and nothing will be going on the mezzanine floor, like a lot of things would be happening on the lower floor. So they can maintain both the things simultaneously.
Yeah. So yeah, I think architecturally this is a very important and a very interesting way of segregating spaces, creating level differences, creating levels. I think these have always been used by different architects, and it's a very powerful way of dealing with space. So I think this mezzanine, Priyanka, did you tell us how under normal circumstances this mezzanine will be used?
Yeah, this mezzanine under normal circumstances can be used for children's play area, as I said, or in case they want to isolate themselves to work from home, or just to have a quiet place, or just to have their own time, so they can go upstairs and stay there for a while, because it's isolated but still connected.
Yeah, because I think one thing about this pandemic, this work from home is going to be the new normal, and that's what we hear people saying around us. So in that case, this mezzanine becomes a very interesting space, because it's quiet, it's isolated, and you don't get disturbed. People don't disturb you in the house, and it's also what I really find very interesting in this mezzanine is the fact that it's complete in itself. It's got a sleeping space, it's got a living space, and most importantly it's got an outdoor space. So these are things that an individual requires, and especially if someone is under quarantine or under isolation and needs to be on his own for say 15 days or perhaps even longer, then this space is complete in itself. And when they come out to this the living space, I can see that I think that living space has railing around it. Yeah, so there is
Yeah.
complete visual interaction between that landing space and the dining room, right? In the
Yeah.
dining room below it, yeah. And also
Yes.
from the bedroom, maybe on this side there can be windows to connect. So yeah, I think it's a great option. And as architects, we always try and play around with levels, with 3D spaces by creating these double height spaces. And now I think we have a new reason to use these spaces. Yeah, I think that's a very interesting design input also. Okay, so another aspect, a very important aspect, in fact, is that we are all at home. I mean, the whole family is at home. Our homes are now working as offices, as classrooms, as studios, even as gyms. or or any kind of space, because our home is all we have at this point. So another repercussion of all this is that there are lots of gadgets that are operating from home. And I think now with we're already into May, and maybe June also we are like this. With all this soaring temperature, the ACs are on. There is a lot of load on electricity. And how do we deal with that? As architects, again, energy conservation is very important. I think we should all appreciate the fact that energy still needs to be conserved. We still shouldn't be paying such high bills, or mounting uh, on our backups and on our DG sets and all those things. So I think I'll now call upon Ritvik Vishish. Ritvik has been thinking in terms of energy conservation and sustainability. So Ritvik, why don't you tell us what your plan is like?
Thanks a lot, ma'am. So my concept of this design this time is like conservation of energy and how we can create a contact of human being with the nature. So to conserve energy, I put some points. First is the orientation of the building. It seriously plays a major role when we create a building, because if we orientate in a good manner, so it will get the natural sunlight and natural ventilation, which is seriously cost efficient. And second point which I'm going through is like the green roof. Green roof, it will insulate the whole building, and it will make the building cool, and heating as well. So if we provide such kind of things in our building, first it will be aesthetically pleasing, and second it will also provide like insulation and the cooling naturally into the building. We don't need other sources regarding that. Second thing is the green balcony. As in the apartments, we don't have the proper terrace, so we just have the balconies through the interaction and through which we can go outside and see our surroundings. So in that case, we can provide the green balcony, because as we can see now, we are coming in June and July, in which lots of heat will come. These are the hot months. So in that case, we will
Summer months, yeah,
summer
right.
months. So in that case, we will utilize lots of ACs and the coolers, which will provide in that case. So in that case we can use the green balcony. There are lots of advantages of green balcony. For example, it produces oxygen, converts CO2 emission, absorb and transform sunlight. And if you have a room near to the balcony, it will directly filter that air, and when it will enter in your room, it will be cool. So, and if you provide also some herbal gardens for the in your balcony as well, it will improve your air quality. Plus, it also provides some impact on your health as well. So, and the third point which I gave is the biosolar green roof. It is a new technology which we are using now, and it's also a sustainable solution for the building. And study also show that people which are using biosolar green roof nowadays in this pandemic, the energy consumption is seriously less in terms of the people who are not using that. Some points which I are not mentioned in this my poster. It's like the common walls concept. Like in apartment, if we talk about the if we don't have the common walls, we have open from three sides, right? If we take an example, so for three sides we have to put some balcony to make some sheds. But if we have a common wall over there, it will be directly like in cool time it will be cool, and in heat time it will be like hot. And it do not have to be we do not have to give some things to make it cool and hot. And the last thing which I am giving is like the jali work, which I am going to. And as you know that it's an ancient beautiful element of the Indo-Islamic architecture, and now it also used as a natural cooler as well, because when air comes through those holes, it compresses that air and make it cool. and the velocity, because of that velocity also compressed, it also get increased. So because of that, you will get the natural cool air from that as well. So these are the points which I'm trying to put in this design, so that my building will be more easily, this is how I can conserve the energy in my building naturally.
Yeah, very good. I think we could, I think, see in your poster a lot of these things. I can see the green balconies, the green roofs, and how in this layout you've tried to put three apartments together
3 apartments, yeah.
with common walls. And then there are solar panels. There are these large terraces
Yeah.
which can also house solar panels for each of the apartments.
Because nowadays, if we talk about the nature as well, lots of people do not have a proper balcony. But if we provide such kind of things in the apartment, it will be easy for every age of people. Like for children, it will be like a park for them, because it's small and it's a huge one, and they can play over there. And for youngs, they can like enjoy the climate, because it's already green and you already have a huge balcony. So in that case, you can provide the swimming pool in that area and other things as well.
Yeah, okay. So I think maybe another aspect to this green balcony could also be the relationship with nature. Yeah, the
Yes.
fact that every person living in apartments, somehow feels that disconnect, because you are on higher floors. You no longer have that direct relationship with your garden or with nature.
Yes.
So by providing that, I think you've also taken care of that relationship with nature. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
And that is also very important, I think, for the social well-being of a person. And I think especially in these times, in these lockdown time when we are just at home, I think that makes it very important to have that outdoor connection. Yeah, I think that's also a very good proposal, Ritvik. I think
Thank you so much, ma'am.
you've addressed some very important issues here. Okay. So I think another very important aspect of all this is, let me just check, is everyone there? Yeah, okay. Another very important aspect of, these, some of these techniques for sustainability, and I think a very important aspect in all our housing buildings and towers is the orientation, right? So the orientation is very important. Sometimes we see, for commercial reasons, people have placed buildings in the south, in the north, in east, facing west, and really that doesn't work. I mean, there are apartments that never get sunlight, and that's such a shame, because now with this pandemic, I think it's been quite proven that sunlight is so important for all of us. So I think something like this has been addressed by Himanshu in your design, Himanshu. Something
Yes, ma'am.
very special about orientation, right? Yeah. So let's see. Can someone share? Yeah, that's Himanshu's design. Okay. Yeah.
So in my concept is based upon how people can maintain their social life and how they can interact. So I propose some areas like balconies, which are staggering backward and forward. Actually, it's the apartments, the towers, which are rearranging like that, so that they will become a social zone in which they can interact with each other while maintaining distances. For the residences, I oriented them in a way so that they all have the same lighting conditions, and the staggering is done in such a way that they can interact and can maintain a privacy as well. Because if they can interact, the interaction should be like they can see them visually from their balconies, and the private zone will be which is not visible to them. And for the open spaces, as you generally we know that it should be green spaces where people can engage in activities and interact with each other. But as you all know, due to this coronavirus, we all have to maintain some distance between each other. So I propose uh, uh, a design like we can give level differences in open spaces so people can feel visually connected to each other, but there will be some distances which will be maintained as well while interacting. So this is my design.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, I think this staggering of different blocks helps a lot. So effectively, the orientation of all apartments is the same. If they have south facing balconies, all of them have south facing balconies. So what's happening with this staggering is that you are giving them a little bit of privacy, and at the same time, if you do want to take those extra steps to the corner of your balcony and talk to your neighbor, you can still do that, right? So yeah, that's I think that's a very I would say a very simple and yet very powerful technique. And the other thing is that there is a large common space between the two big blocks, right? I can see that large green open space, and because again we have to maintain physical distancing, and so he's created these different levels in an attempt to make sure that children are playing say some like there are few children playing at this level and there are few children playing at that level,
The
and
lower level, yes.
yeah, and there is some amount of physical distancing that's maintained. So I think this is also like a very simple yet very powerful way of conveying, that we do need to maintain social distancing. We do need plenty of sunlight in every living space within our houses. It's not as if some apartments can just go without sun. I mean, it's no longer possible, right? Yeah, I think that's also a great attempt. Thanks, Himanshu. And Priyanka, if you can take away this slide, let me see if is Prayas online. Prayas actually is our student who lives in Muscat, and there have been some power issues with him, and I cannot see him online. If he comes online, I think we'll connect with him. In the meantime, I can see that there are lots of viewers, and they are they are talking about they have some questions. Some of them are also talking about how some of these buildings are they remind them of some other buildings. Yeah, that's totally possible because I tell you what, our students have taken a lot of inspiration from some great architects like Charles Correa and Raj Rewal and even Habib Rahman. So I think when we started this studio, we actually talked about how all these architects at their time came up with different things and different concepts, and that's what made them so great because they thought beyond beyond their times, right? So how Raj Rival was very good with staggering plans, staggering elevations, staggering sections, and he used that technique in a number of different ways. When we look at his apartment blocks, his commercial blocks, or any of his buildings, I mean the staggering and the play of volumes is something that happens a lot in his design. So I'll come back to the architects. In the meantime, I can see Prayas. So Prayas has managed to connect with us
Good afternoon.
despite the power problem, right? Okay, Prayas, why don't you quickly explain
Yep.
before there is some connectivity issue? Yeah, quickly explain your design and your input. Yeah.
Okay. Can I start explaining the concept? Is it visible?
Yeah, yeah. It's visible and you're audible. Please carry on.
Okay. So this is my conceptual design that I've made. I've worked on two aspects. One is on individual apartment planning, and the other is site planning as a whole. So as you can see, like this is an apartment, and this is the basic module that I've created. It consists of step terraces and two portions, one that's facing us, one that's facing the opposite direction. The side that's facing us, it starts from the ground floor, and the opposite side is raised on stilts. So this is to promote ventilation and circulation. And the reason I did this kind of planning was to basically encourage people to move
Yeah,
inside
I
their
think
houses to outside.
there is still some connectivity.
Am I audible?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Please
Yes. So I wanted to integrate the interior and exterior spaces and have open and closed areas of, within the apartment. So after this, I showed some methods of arranging. Like there's the abstract method and there's the geometric method. And the most efficient form of planning is to have
Okay,
courtyards.
I think
Courtyards
Prayas
are
doesn't have good connectivity today. And
oh, okay.
yeah,
If it's if it's visible, then I'd like to show courtyards. They improve ventilation and sunlight within the site, and they also zone out areas. So each area can have their own private zone. So this is the advantage of the planning that can be created by this apartment module. So this is the concept.
okay. I think Prayas, I think I will explain some of these things that I know.
Yes,
So
yes.
I think your voice is breaking a little bit. So there is continuity in this explanation. So what Prayas has actually done, he's developed a very interesting module. If you see this kind of two C-shaped apartment blocks, he's clubbed them together, and he's tried to develop a module that when these modules connect with each other, they form very interesting courtyards and very interesting community spaces. So that's one very important aspect. The other important aspect is that he's tried to raise buildings on stilts and provide these voids and step terraces in his building blocks so that there is a lot of wind flow. So he's also tried to check the orientation of the wind flow, and he's tried to make sure that there is enough wind. As we are all aware that this virus, the COVID-19 virus, is something that stays suspended in the air for a while, and that's why it is so infectious that anybody can inhale it and anybody can breathe it in and catch the infection. So this flow of wind, this well ventilated spaces, well ventilated outdoor spaces and indoor spaces are very important to our housing schemes now. And I think that's what Prayas has tried to put in his design. He's developed this module, and with this module, he's made of the wind flow a very important part of his design. So and the other part is that these community spaces that he's enveloped with this design. So there are, like, say, 3 apartment blocks have a common courtyard for themselves, and then another 3 have a separate courtyard. These courtyards are connected to each other, but at the same time people have this common space that they look onto. So it also becomes that interactive space where they all look onto it. Their balcony space all this common space, and they do see each other. They do I mean, in spite of the physical distance, there is no social distance. And again, that's a very, very positive part of it. Prayas, were you able to hear me? Is there anything you would like to add to it? Is there
No, ma'am. This is exactly what I was trying to say. Also, the air quality has improved a lot during the quarantine.
Yeah,
So that's
okay,
why
okay,
I'm encouraging
okay,
people to
okay. Yeah, thank you so much.
leave.
Okay,
Okay.
so I think coming back to, yeah, yeah. So no, we do understand the two aspects that you've looked at, the apartment design as well as the community space design. So that was I think most of the students have already presented, and you will all notice that each one of them is thinking in a different way, but at the same time adding very positively to this post-COVID architecture thinking. And I feel really very good about how this COVID has triggered a lot of these innovative, creative ways of looking at things, and rethinking and recalibrating our own living spaces, our own architecture. And sometimes, yes, like somebody asked in one of the questions about, they said one apartment looks like Tara Apartments. Yes, we are very, very strongly influenced by Charles Correa and his innovation. So, uh, before we started, before we started this exercise, we did look at a number of architects who contributed very positively, especially to this, our kind of NCR environment and climatic conditions. So we looked at how Joseph Allen Stein has designed things with local materials, using local vocabulary, using jalis for providing shade, using open spaces, combining open spaces with built up spaces. Then we looked at even Raj Rewal with his, like I mentioned, with his staggered, appearance in plan, in elevation, in section, and how he maximized usability and functionality with that staggering. Uh, then we have been looking at Charles Correa also. Charles Correa is I think our all-time favorite, and yeah, he has very very special ways of going from vernacular to even his contribution in Dharavi has been remarkable. From very very basic vernacular, economically viable structures to again very very fancy and very how do I say, luxurious kind of apartments and architecture, going right up to British Council building and LIC building in CP. And I think he is probably very, very versatile. And all these students have actually been looking at those architects and what their contribution was, and they have been all trying to imbibe something very positive. I think Priyanka has also adopted something from Habib Rahman's architecture, and that was a very very special architecture, I think, for independent India. He kind of we saw some of his very simple housing apartment designs and how he's uh, brought out the courtyard from a vernacular house into the apartment. And in sector 13 Arkepuram, all those houses that you see where the courtyard and where the courtyard has come into the balcony of the house, and how that space has become so important, and how he staggers them at 90 degrees. So these students have been very very actively looking at it, and they have been in a very positive way been inspired by those architects. So anybody else, I think I also have some very specific questions. I think Priyom, are you
Yes,
there?
ma'am.
Okay.
Yes.
Priyam,
Yes, ma'am.
yeah, Priyam. So somebody is asking, what type of solutions are you providing for these temporary partitions?
Uh, Ma'am, we can provide PVC partitions,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
are transparent, uh, which are normally used in factories to actually cover the क्या बोलते हैं उसे machinery, but
Yeah,
they have a visual contact to the machinery. They don't want the क्या बोलते pollution to get out in the factory, so they do that. So I think that can be a solution, or we can provide curtains or like those transparent those curtains we can provide. These are very easy to install and can be installed anywhere. So I think
yeah. The
uh,
transparency, I think, is the important aspect, right?
aspects.
Yeah,
Yeah. Transparency is the main thing.
yeah. Okay. Then I think another question is very specifically for Kristin. Kristin,
Yes, ma'am.
have you thought about giving workspace? While you've been talking about living space and about recreation, about outdoor space, have you thought about giving workspace to these Dharavi residents? Because apparently they are also very productive in our economy. And so, how do you respond to that? Would you provide something separate? Would you think of providing something separate? Would you think of providing it, as part of the outdoor, semi-outdoor space? What else would you think of? Yeah.
Thank you for the question. And I would like to say that it is basically for the residential areas, but it's a bed. It's a mattress, you can remove it, and it is a multi-purpose area after all. I'm using a 6 meter by 2.3 meter size container. And half of this, as you can see, is going in as uh, kitchen slab, washrooms. Everyone has their personal washrooms. But second half is entirely free. Second halves have the ventilation, has lighting for everything. So apart from bigger machineries for textile industries, small machineries like for tailoring or something like that, we can definitely do such kind of activities in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
More than that, we have accessibility to a small area, balcony kind of area, as you can see in here. This is provided for everyone. So in this area, as you can see, they have all four of that kind. And this is for spaces like this, if they have too much storage spaces, so they can store something outside the building. Yeah. And they have chacha over it. So that's why I didn't even create a building on the fourth floor, because there's a water tank in there and there is a natural chacha as well.
Right.
I don't have to create an artificial chacha. And I'd like to say one more question. A person asked about fixings and everything like that. Yeah. The doors are done. They're cutting out this places, the cavity. They installing the frame, then the door, as we can see in normal buildings and stuff. For corridors, what I've done is to create a tensile, is creating a truss with a steel sections, so that they look like a hanging corridor. I didn't want it to create a general corridor from columns and beams. That would be good, but that is possible, but that is common. But creating something like this would create a much more effect to it. And that's it. Like, I think I've covered what I have said so far. All the walls, what I'm showing is, it's a wall which is reflective in inside and green in outside. And how I think of creating that wall is also designed there. There's a small 3D effect, 3D thing, 3D effect what I've shown you in here. And that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. So I think what I want all of you is to very briefly and very quickly explain, the architects that have inspired you. So, I mean, I have been talking about it, and there was also this mention of Tara Apartments. So I think just very quickly, maybe one-liners, and I think then we'll wrap up in case there are no other questions. There are some. Okay. Yeah, I think one more. One quick question we can take. It's about the movement, or the circulation of the helpers and the residents in your apartment block. Priyam, are you there? I think
Yes, ma'am.
we are all facing this issue right now, that the helpers, the part-time helpers, were not allowed, and now they are slowly trickling in. And we know for sure that they come from very densely populated areas, and their exposure to the virus is perhaps much more than all of us. And
Yes.
how do we really, can we take care of it architecturally?
Yes,
Did you
ma'am. I
think
have
about it?
actually have kept that aspect. So I have
Segregate.
actually segregated the flow of the staff. So
Yeah.
every shaft will come into this area, and
Yeah.
then you can see the servant entrance have a different foyer itself, or the entrance foyer, which can again be barricaded. It can be examined by the living area, by the dwelling unit holders. They can stay. They can see that if he's sanitizing himself, then he can sanitize himself, and then he can enter the house. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a disinfect rigid area, like about it's a sanitization point. That's it. As I've told, Keval mentioned before, it's very easy to create buffer zones before about entering any facility. So
Main
it
lobby.
just two aspects: segregating the flow and giving a buffer zone,
Yeah.
and providing all the shafts in that area, so that if there is any landline issue or any TV issue, the person doesn't have to go to the main entrance for it. He will go to this, he will come to this shaft, he
Yeah.
will fix it, and then he will leave from the same area. And as
Yeah.
you can see, after the lift opens, there is a sanitization point as well. So we can do that.
Yeah.
So
Very. Yeah. Yeah.
these kind of
Very.
segregation aspects
Yeah.
we can keep in mind.
A clear segregation here that we can see. So their circulation with the service lift, with the fire escape staircase, and the entry into the helper's room is completely separate. And whereas the main lift lobby remains clean and easy to use for the residents, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
I think that's also good thinking. So just quick liners from all of you about somebody who inspired you, an architect who inspired you. Maybe it can just be a single line. Prayas, if you have good connectivity, you can start. Prayas, I think you're still on mute.
Yeah, unmuted. The architect who inspired me is a German architect. His name is Ol Sheeran, and he has a lot of good buildings. The most memorable being Interlace, which is in Singapore.
Yeah, yeah.
The Interlace. It has a similar division of spaces, and it looks like Lego blocks stacked on top of each other,
Right.
and it's a skyscraper. It's a quite interesting
Hmm.
architecture.
Yeah, indeed. I think that is a very interesting block, and how I think he also, by staggering how he develops these
The
modules
zone.
and plays around with the open and built up spaces. Yeah, indeed, very nice. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Anybody else? Priyanka, do you want to go next? Unmute yourself, please. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was inspired by Habib Rahman for staggered balconies, as you've mentioned before, that he brought
The quote, yeah.
back in the independence, he brought the concept of yard in the balcony. So that's what I try to do in on my mezzanine floor, so that people can stay connected and they can still have like a connection to the nature. So I was inspired by Habib Rahman for balconies.
Yeah, great, great. Yeah. Who else? I think Himanshu. Do you have anybody in mind?
As you mentioned, the Charles Korea Tara apartment, I inspired from that. But yeah, the Tara apartment is a little bit compact in spaces,
Yeah.
and the core area is a little bit visible from the outside also. In Tara apartment, my design is not like that. It has very much spaces, and the core area is in between the towers. It is in the middle. It's not like that.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
green spaces also have some levels to it. It is very interactive and little bit different from Tara apartments.
Yeah, yeah. Tara apartment was a landmark, complex in its times. I think the first place where cars were not going into every apartment. Cars had to be parked separately. At the same time, I think the basement had not come in yet, so everybody had to walk to their apartments, and the whole environment was very pedestrian friendly and yeah, not interrupted by vehicular traffic. Yeah,
Particular, yeah.
yeah. So, okay, Ritvik, do you have anybody who inspired you or?
Yes, ma'am. I was inspired by Joseph Elmiston. He's an
Okay.
American artist, American architect, sorry.
Yeah,
And he was a major figure of the establishment of regional modernism as well, with the organic materials, for example, brick, wood, stones. And the vision which he has was mostly inclined towards the simple life with the natural touch in his design. So I
yeah,
would like to,
yeah. I can see some of that jali work,
yeah,
using of local stones and
yeah.
yeah, that kind of vocabulary. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, that's nice too. Anybody else? Kristen, do you have anything to say or Uh,
And what inspired me was colonial Spanish architecture with a twist of Indian architecture as well, because Indian architecture always had corridors, there's courtyards and all this stuff, which was actually useful because of ventilation stuff. And the corridors which were inspired by the Spanish colonial architecture because of the trusses and all. They created them for wood, I created them from steel. That's the difference.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay, great. I think we can now wrap up our session. I think thank you all for being a part of this and showing your work to us. And I am so glad that students your generation are actually thinking of this, and this whole thought process that has been triggered by COVID-19 and this lockdown. I hope it continues. So yeah, just that I think all students probably everywhere, I mean not just our own students, but I would say that to students, whoever is listening, whoever is a part of this, that please keep on thinking, please keep on responding to the different situations that arise in the world. I am so glad that this whole thing came together very beautifully. As architects, we're continuously working, on our built environment, on our open spaces, and it is so important to respond to the changing conditions. It is so important to respond to things in a sustainable way. And how this COVID-19 just came and swept us all off our feet, and leaving us to think of solutions, to think of creative ideas and more solution oriented architecture. So I'm so glad this whole exercise went off well, and I do hope that this momentum doesn't stop right till your jury and right till the time I think you enter the profession. It's so important, I think, for architects or for anybody else actually to be sensitive, to the needs around us. I mean, in our personal life, professional life, I think it goes a very long way. Thank you all to our viewers, whoever's been listening, whoever's had something to learn from this. We wish you all a very happy and a very healthy lockdown period, and hopefully we will all be out of it very soon. Thank you all so much. I think we can. Yeah.